You can be a leader, even without a title. That simple truth may sound paradoxical, but it has been proven time and again in the lives of ordinary men and women who never held a corner office, who never had their names engraved on shiny plaques, and yet, when they spoke, people listened. When they acted, others followed. Leadership is not chained to hierarchy. It is rooted in influence. Picture a workplace, a bustling office where one person doesn't carry a manager's badge, doesn't sign anyone's paycheck, and yet the entire team gravitates toward them. They are the one people confide in, the one others turn to for advice, the one who can rally spirits on a difficult day. This is leadership in its purest form. It has nothing to do with rank, and everything to do with the ability to spark belief in others. And let me pause here. Before we go further, if you're listening right now, I'd love for you to join the conversation. Drop a comment about where you're tuning in from and the exact time you're listening. That helps us see how far our shared journey reaches. And don't forget to subscribe to Audiobook Sanctuary and tap the bell so you'll never miss when the next story, the next voice of wisdom, is ready to meet you. Now let's return. Think about your own life. Perhaps in your family, there is a person everyone looks toward in times of difficulty. Not because they're the eldest, not because they're the wealthiest, but because their words carry weight. Their presence calms storms. Or maybe you've seen it in a local community, where someone without office or authority becomes the heartbeat of a movement. They may not sit on city council, but their voice brings neighbors together. Their vision paints a picture others want to step into. Leadership begins here, with influence. Titles may command obedience, but influence earns trust. Titles may enforce compliance, but influence awakens loyalty. A job description can demand performance, but only inspiration unlocks the full measure of someone's potential. If you've ever wondered what it means to be a leader without being in charge, you're not alone. Many of history's most inspiring figures began in obscurity, without titles, without recognition. Rosa Parks was not a senator, not a mayor, not a governor. She was a seamstress. And yet, her quiet act of defiance, refusing to give up her seat on a segregated bus, sparked a movement that shook the foundations of injustice. Her leadership was not bestowed, it was born. This is the heart of our journey. We will walk together through the landscapes of vision, of storytelling, of empathy, and of courage. We'll meet leaders across time and culture, and we'll see how the essence of leadership is not chained to power, but unleashed by purpose. So let me ask you, if one day your nameplate vanished, your title disappeared, and your authority dissolved, would anyone still follow you? The answer to that question reveals what kind of leader you truly are. But before we can explore the tools and the habits of inspiring leadership, we need to unlock its foundation. And that foundation is vision. If leadership is influence, then vision is the light that makes that influence visible. Just as a lighthouse guides ships across a dark ocean, a leader's vision guides others through uncertainty. Without vision, leadership is blind. With vision, even the smallest voice can move mountains. And so, in the next chapter of our journey, we will explore the true power of vision, not as a corporate slogan or a line on a wall, but as the living heartbeat that awakens trust, courage, and unity. Vision is the heartbeat of leadership. Without it, even the most charismatic personality runs out of fuel. With it, ordinary people can ignite extraordinary change. Vision is what transforms influence from a flickering candle into a blazing torch that others are willing to follow into the unknown. Think about it. When people are asked to work hard, they may comply. But when people are invited to work toward a shared vision, they commit. They don't just do tasks, they carry dreams. They don't just follow orders, they carry belief. That is why true leaders don't stop at explaining what needs to be done. They lift others by revealing why it matters. Consider the words of Martin Luther King Jr. He never said, "I have a plan." He said, "I have a dream." Those words echoed far beyond policies, strategies, and organizational charts. His dream gave people a sense of meaning that transcended fear and fatigue. When he painted that vision of racial equality, people marched not because they were ordered to, but because they saw themselves in a better future. His vision became their own. But vision isn't just for great leaders etched in history books. Look closer, and you'll see it in small corners of everyday life. Imagine a school teacher who tells her students, "You are not just here to memorize facts. You are here to discover the strength of your own voice." That vision doesn't just create good test scores. It creates courage. Or think about a small business owner who gathers employees and says, "We're not just selling coffee. We are creating a place where people feel like they belong." That vision gives every barista and cashier a sense of pride that reaches far beyond a paycheck. Vision is contagious because it taps into something universal: the human need for purpose. People can endure long hours, setbacks, even failures, if they believe those struggles are building towards something meaningful. Soldiers march into danger not because they love risk, but because they believe in protecting their homeland. Parents sacrifice daily not because life is easy, but because they hold a vision of giving their children better opportunities. Vision transforms suffering into sacrifice, and sacrifice into significance. And here's the secret. Vision is not about grand speeches or flawless presentations. It often starts in quiet places, with a question, with a conviction, with a whisper that refuses to be silenced. Think of Florence Nightingale. Before she was known as the Lady with the Lamp, she was a woman with a vision that the wounded deserved dignity, that healing required compassion as much as medicine. Against social barriers and resistance, she carried her vision into the hospitals of the Crimean War, and her light continues to inspire generations of nurses today. Yet vision is fragile if it is not lived. A leader who proclaims lofty dreams but acts in contradiction will lose trust. To sustain influence, vision must align with action. Imagine a leader who speaks endlessly about honesty but bends the truth when convenient. The words may sound inspiring, but the cracks in action will eventually collapse the structure. That is why vision must not only be spoken, it must be embodied. Let's pause and reflect. What is the vision that guides your daily actions? Not the one printed in company handbooks, but the one that burns in your heart. Is it the desire to leave your children a kinder world? To create beauty where there was none? To heal wounds that others have ignored? When your why is clear, the what and the how become easier to follow. And remember, vision grows stronger when shared. A seed of vision in one heart is fragile, but when planted in the soil of a community, it becomes a tree that can shelter many. Leaders know this truth, which is why they invite others into their vision. They say not, "Here is what I will achieve," but, "Here is what we can build together." When John F. Kennedy declared that America would go to the moon, he wasn't just making a political statement. He was inviting a nation to believe in the impossible. Scientists, engineers, and everyday workers rallied not simply because of orders, but because they wanted to be part of a story larger than themselves. That is the magnetic power of vision. It transforms duty into destiny. So, as we continue, keep this picture in mind. Leadership is influence, But vision is the compass that directs that influence. Without vision, leadership is wandering. With vision, even the smallest step carries weight, because it is aimed at a horizon worth reaching. And this brings us naturally to the next truth. Vision alone is not enough. People are inspired not only by what you say, but by how you live. Words create the spark, but example fans the flame. To lead without power, you must embody the vision you proclaim. That is where true credibility begins. Vision can light the path, but it is the example you set that convinces others to walk it with you. A dream spoken aloud is powerful, but when that dream is reflected in daily action, it becomes irresistible. People are always watching more closely than they are listening. They may forget your words, but they will remember the way you lived them. Imagine the workplace again. A leader may stand before the team and declare, "We value integrity here." But if that same leader cuts corners, takes credit for others' work, or avoids accountability, the words become hollow. Conversely, think of someone who quietly does what is right even when no one is watching. They may never raise their voice or demand attention, yet the consistency of their actions builds a reservoir of trust. Over time, that trust becomes influence. Storytelling plays a vital role in living the example. Stories are not just narratives. They are mirrors in which people see themselves. When a leader tells a story about overcoming fear, about learning through failure, or about standing up for values, they are not boasting. They are opening a door for others to step through. And when their actions match the lessons in their stories, credibility deepens. Take Mahatma Gandhi as an illustration. He was not a general with armies at his command, nor a politician wielding executive power. His strength lay in his congruence. His words and actions aligned. He preached nonviolence, and he lived nonviolence, even under brutal oppression. That integrity made him unassailable, because his life itself became the message. Gandhi's leadership was a living story, and millions followed because they could trust what they saw. But this principle applies beyond global figures. Consider a manager who shares how, early in their career, they once mishandled a project, but learned to ask for help instead of hiding mistakes. If that same manager now encourages open conversations about failure, the story becomes more than a lesson. It becomes a cultural foundation. People realize this leader doesn't just say mistakes are allowed. They have lived through one, and they understand. Living the example is also about consistency. Anyone can be inspiring for a moment. But true influence is built in the small, repeated choices that line up over time. Think of the parent who promises their child, "I'll be there for your games." When they show up again and again, sometimes tired, sometimes busy, but present nonetheless, that example teaches more about loyalty and love than any lecture ever could. Consistency transforms inspiration into trust, and trust into loyalty. At times, living the example means sacrificing comfort. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, not because he loved hardship, but because he would not abandon his vision of equality. His life in confinement was itself a story of resilience. And when he walked free, the authenticity of his sacrifice gave him unparalleled moral authority. His leadership came not from a title, but from a life lived as a testimony. So ask yourself, what story are your actions telling today? Do they echo the values you speak, or do they contradict them? Every action is a line in the story of your leadership. People don't follow speeches, they follow stories, and the most powerful stories are lived, not told. Living the example also requires humility. It is not about crafting a perfect image, but about showing authenticity. People are not inspired by flawless leaders. They are inspired by leaders who are real, who stumble yet rise, who admit mistakes yet keep striving. That humanity makes space for others to step forward too. A flawless facade creates distance. Authenticity builds connection. When words, stories, and actions align, a leader becomes a beacon. The influence flows not from authority, but from the magnetic pull of integrity. This is how a teacher inspires lifelong learners, how a neighbor becomes a community pillar, how a colleague becomes the soul of a team. And this truth leads us to the next essential piece of inspiring leadership: empathy. Vision shows the way, example builds credibility, but empathy creates connection. Without it, leadership risks becoming a lonely performance. With it, leadership becomes a shared journey. For to truly inspire, one must not only speak but also listen, not only act but also feel. Leadership without empathy is a performance without an audience. You can speak with passion, paint a vision of dazzling beauty, even live with impeccable integrity. But if you cannot hear the heartbeat of the people you hope to inspire, your influence will remain shallow. Empathy is the bridge that carries vision into the hearts of others. Think of the leaders you've respected most in your life. Were they the loudest, the most authoritative, or were they the ones who made you feel heard, seen, understood? Empathy is not weakness. It is the ability to step into another person's experience and say, "I see you, I feel with you, and I walk beside you." This is the kind of leadership that creates loyalty deeper than rules and longer lasting than commands. Let's consider Abraham Lincoln. In the darkest days of the American Civil War, he was known to leave his office late at night to visit the Union hospitals. He walked among wounded soldiers, listened to their fears, held their hands, and even wrote personal letters to grieving families. He did not need to do this as president, yet he chose to. Soldiers said it felt as if Lincoln carried their pain in his own heart. His empathy did not erase the horrors of war, but it gave people courage to endure them. But empathy is not reserved for presidents or prime ministers. In a corporate office, empathy can be as simple as a supervisor noticing when an employee is struggling and asking, "Are you okay?" before asking about the deadline. It can be a colleague who senses the quiet sadness in a teammate's silence and offers a moment to talk. These small gestures may not seem grand, but to the person receiving them, they can mean the difference between despair and determination. Empathy also requires listening beyond words. People rarely say exactly what they mean. They reveal it in tone, in pauses, in body language, in what is left unsaid. A leader who listens deeply, who asks not just what happened, but how did it feel, opens doors to trust. And when people trust you with their stories, they give you a gift greater than obedience. They give you their hearts. Consider Mother Teresa. She never held a political office, never commanded armies, and yet she moved the world. Why? Because she embodied radical empathy. She did not simply care for the poor. She sat with them, touched them, treated them as equals. In her presence, people who were invisible to society suddenly felt seen. That empathy became a force stronger than power, because it awakened dignity in those who had been stripped of it. Empathy is also what allows leaders to connect vision with reality. A visionary without empathy risks building castles in the sky that no one else can reach. But a visionary with empathy crafts dreams that others feel they belong to. When a leader listens, they discover what people truly long for, what they fear, what they hope. Then they can shape a vision that feels like our dream, not just their dream. But empathy is not just about kindness. it is also about courage. Sometimes empathy requires hard conversations. It is sitting across from someone and telling them the truth they don't want to hear, but doing it with compassion. It is guiding people through change, not with cold efficiency, but with an understanding of the anxiety that change stirs. Empathy is not softness. It is strength clothed in tenderness. Imagine a company facing layoffs. A leader driven only by numbers may deliver the news with brutal detachment. But an empathetic leader speaks with humanity, acknowledges the pain, and offers support for the transition. The decision may still be difficult, but the manner in which it is delivered can either crush dignity or preserve it. Now ask yourself, who are the people in your life that need more than your words? They need your listening, your patience, your presence. To inspire others, you must first allow their stories to inspire you. When leaders practice empathy, something remarkable happens. They stop being performers on a stage and become companions on a journey. People follow not because they are dazzled, but because they feel connected. And connection is the soil in which lasting influence grows. But empathy alone is not the whole story. Leadership that inspires draws wisdom not just from personal experience, but also from those who walked before us. History offers us countless voices, some quiet, some thunderous, that prove the power of influence without authority. To understand where we are going, we must learn from where we have come. When we look to history, we discover a powerful truth. Some of the most transformative leaders the world has ever known never held great positions of power. Their strength came not from crowns, armies, or wealth, but from the influence of their vision, the consistency of their example, and the depth of their empathy. Their lives are reminders that leadership is not bestowed by institutions. It is earned in the hearts of people. Take Joan of Arc. She was a peasant girl in medieval France, a teenager with no training, no noble title, and no claim to authority. Yet, in a moment of national despair, she rose with conviction, claiming she was called to lead France to victory. Against all odds, hardened soldiers and skeptical nobles followed her. They did not follow because she wielded political power. They followed because her faith, courage, and clarity inspired them. Her leadership burned so brightly that it could not be extinguished, even when she faced death. Joan's life is proof that influence often outlives authority. Or consider Harriet Tubman. She was born enslaved, with no rights, no recognition, and no legal authority. Yet she became one of the greatest conductors of the Underground Railroad, leading hundreds to freedom. People called her Moses because, like the biblical figure, she gave people hope in the midst of oppression. What did she command them with? Not titles, not wealth, only courage, compassion, and an unshakable vision of freedom. Harriet's story shows that the truest leadership is not about commanding from above, but walking beside others into a better future. History is also filled with voices that led through ideas. Think of Socrates in ancient Athens. He never held a high office. He simply asked questions that challenged assumptions, revealed truth, and stirred people to think deeply. His method, now called the Socratic dialogue, transformed philosophy and education. His leadership was not about commanding followers, but about awakening thinkers. And centuries later, his influence remains alive in classrooms and conversations across the world. In the 20th century, we can look to Martin Luther King Jr., whose leadership we touched upon earlier. His influence was born not from political authority, but from moral conviction. He carried no government office, yet his voice shifted the conscience of a nation. He preached a vision of justice anchored in nonviolence, and people listened because they could feel the authenticity of his dream. He did not need to say, "Obey me." Instead, he invited people to see what America could become, and they chose to march with him. And let us not forget someone like Václav Havel, the Czech playwright who became a dissident against communist oppression. Before he ever held the title of president, his essays and plays inspired people with the courage to resist lies and cling to truth. He reminded them that living in truth was itself an act of defiance. His leadership arose from the pen, not the podium, and yet it lit the spark of revolution. What do these figures share? They remind us that leadership is not about control, it is about conviction. They show us that a leader without power, when armed with vision, empathy, and integrity, can shape the destiny of nations. And perhaps the most striking element is this: their leadership cost them something. Joan of Arc gave her life. Harriet Tubman risked hers again and again. Socrates drank the hemlock rather than abandon his pursuit of truth. King was assassinated because of his unshakable commitment to justice. Havel endured imprisonment for speaking out. True leadership often comes with sacrifice, because it demands living for something greater than oneself. But these sacrifices were not in vain. Their legacies echo because people recognized authenticity in them. Titles fade, governments crumble, monuments fall, but the influence of authentic leadership endures across centuries. So what can we learn from these voices of history? That you do not need to wait for permission to lead. You do not need a position to inspire. You need clarity of vision, courage to live it, empathy to connect with others, and persistence to carry it through. These qualities belong not only to heroes in history books, but also to each of us. And as we turn from history to the present, we will see that this truth continues. In our modern world, in businesses, communities, and movements, leadership without authority is alive and thriving. Ordinary men and women are shaping lives, shifting cultures, and inspiring change, not because of titles, but because of authenticity. Leadership without authority is not a relic of the past. It is alive today in countless forms, often in places we least expect. While history gives us towering figures like Joan of Arc or Martin Luther King Jr., our modern era is filled with men and women who shape the world around them without needing official titles. They lead by authenticity, by purpose, and by influence that rises naturally from who they are. Think of Malala Yousafzai. Long before she became a global icon, she was simply a young girl who believed in the right to education. She had no political office, no institutional power. Yet, with courage and clarity, she spoke up against forces that sought to silence her. Her voice, though small, echoed across the world. People listened because they recognized authenticity. Today, she continues to inspire millions, not because of a crown or a position, but because her life embodies her vision. In the business world, modern examples abound. Consider Howard Schultz, who grew up in a poor housing complex in Brooklyn before leading Starbucks into a global brand. When asked about leadership, Schultz repeatedly emphasized not profits first, but people first. He believed that treating employees with dignity, providing healthcare, creating a sense of belonging, was as vital as selling coffee. It wasn't his CEO title that made baristas respect him. It was the consistency of his actions and the vision he cast for a workplace built on humanity. But leadership without authority isn't limited to names we read in the news. It happens every day in local communities. Picture a neighborhood where a single parent organizes after-school reading sessions for children. She has no official role, but soon parents and kids gather weekly, encouraged by her dedication. Or imagine a volunteer who shows up faithfully at a food pantry. Not just handing out meals, but learning the names of those in line, listening to their stories, and treating them with dignity. Over time, others are drawn to help, inspired not by commands, but by compassion. This is leadership in its purest form: quiet, authentic, contagious. In the digital age, influence often begins with authenticity. Some of today's most powerful leaders are not CEOs or politicians, but individuals who use their platforms to inspire change. Think of Greta Thunberg, a teenager who began with a solitary protest outside her parliament. She held no office, had no staff, but her authenticity sparked a movement across continents. Millions followed because her vision of protecting the planet resonated with a generation searching for hope. Leadership today also emerges inside organizations from unexpected places. A junior employee who speaks up for diversity and inclusion can shape company culture more powerfully than a memo from HR. A nurse who comforts families during a crisis can change the spirit of an entire hospital ward. A coach who believes in a struggling player can unlock confidence that transforms a team. These leaders may never sit at the top of an organizational chart, but they sit at the center of human trust and influence. What unites all these modern examples is authenticity. In a world flooded with marketing, slogans, and surface-level promises, people are hungry for what is real. They are drawn not to perfection, but to sincerity. Leaders who admit mistakes, who share struggles, who live with transparency, invite others into genuine connection. And from that connection comes influence. Another element that defines modern leadership without power is purpose. Purpose transcends personal ambition. Leaders today inspire not by saying, "Look at me," but by saying, "Look at what we can do together." Purpose gives followers a reason to invest their energy, to sacrifice convenience, to endure hardship. It shifts leadership from self-centered to community-centered, from controlling to empowering. Ask yourself, who in your circle embodies this kind of influence? It may be a colleague who refuses to gossip and instead brings peace to workplace tension. It may be a friend who consistently encourages others, making everyone around them feel more capable. These are not just kind people, they are leaders because they inspire others to rise. Leadership in our time has been democratized. Social media, community networks, and cultural shifts have created more space for influence without titles. But the principles remain the same as they were in history: vision, example, empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Authority may change hands, but inspiration belongs to anyone willing to live it. And so, as we near the conclusion of our journey, we must ask, how do we awaken this leader within ourselves? History and modern life have shown us examples, but the final chapter is deeply personal. It is about realizing that leadership is not something given to you. It is something you choose to embrace. The question is not, will others allow me to lead? The real question is, am I ready to inspire? Every story we have walked through so far, whether in history or in the present, has pointed toward one truth: the potential for leadership lives within each of us. You do not need an office, a badge, or a title to awaken it. The question is whether you are willing to see yourself as a source of inspiration and to live in a way that helps others believe in themselves. The awakening of the leader within begins with self-awareness. It requires an honest look in the mirror and the courage to ask, what values guide me? What vision pulls me forward? What kind of influence do my words and actions leave behind? Leadership is not about pretending to be perfect. It is about recognizing the story you are already telling and choosing to tell it with intention. Think of an orchestra without a conductor. At first it might seem chaotic, yet often one musician, without being appointed, naturally sets the tempo. Their passion, their steadiness, their ability to listen to others guides the entire group. That musician may not have authority, but they hold influence. In the same way, each of us can be that steadying presence in our families, workplaces, and communities. Awakening the leader within also means embracing responsibility. Leadership is not about control, it is about service. When you help someone discover their strength, when you encourage a hesitant voice to speak, when you create space for others to shine, you are leading. Influence grows not from how much you achieve for yourself, but from how much you awaken in others. Consider the story of Fred Rogers, better known as Mr. Rogers. He never governed a nation, never ran a corporation, and never commanded armies. Yet his quiet television program shaped generations with lessons of kindness, empathy, and self-worth. His influence was not loud, but it was enduring. Why? Because he helped children believe in their own dignity. That is leadership at its most profound, not demanding followers, but nurturing leaders in others. Everyday life offers countless opportunities to awaken this kind of leadership. When you choose patience in a heated argument, you lead by example. When you mentor a younger colleague, you pass on vision. When you comfort a grieving friend, you lead through empathy. None of these acts require titles, but all of them carry weight. The truth is, many people hesitate because they think leadership is something reserved for the exceptional few. But leadership is not about being extraordinary. It is about being consistent. It is not about doing great things once. It is about doing small things faithfully, day after day. When you smile at a stranger, when you show up on time, when you keep your word, these ordinary choices weave together into an extraordinary influence. And here lies the heart of it. Leadership is about awakening belief. The greatest gift you can give another human being is not money, not advice, not even opportunity. It is belief. When someone looks at you and realizes, because of them, I believe I can, you have become a true leader. So as we close this journey, remember, leadership does not live in titles. It lives in choices. It is not locked in corner offices. It is carried in ordinary lives. You already have the capacity to inspire. The only question is whether you will choose to live it. Leadership is not power. Leadership is the art of lighting a flame in another person's heart. Titles come and go. Power shifts from hand to hand. But the ability to awaken belief, to spark courage, to inspire hope, this remains forever. Perhaps you have thought, I am not important enough to lead. Yet history, modern life, and even your own experience tell a different story. True leadership is not about importance. It is about impact. And impact can begin with the smallest of gestures. Think of the nurse who holds a patient's hand when fear takes over. Think of the teacher who looks at a struggling student and says, I believe in you. Think of the neighbor who organizes a meal for a grieving family. These leaders may never make headlines, but they make humanity better. And that is the truest measure of leadership. You have the ability to be that leader. You have a vision that someone else needs to see, a story that someone else needs to hear, a listening ear that someone else desperately needs to find. You may never hold a title, but you hold influence. You may never sign paychecks, but you can sign lives with hope. The call of this journey is simple. Lead where you are, with what you have, for those around you. Live your values consistently. Speak your vision clearly. Listen with empathy deeply. And never forget that the greatest leadership is helping others believe in themselves. So the next time you wonder if you are a leader, remember this. When you give someone the courage to take the next step, when you inspire them to rise after falling, when you remind them of their own worth, you have led in the most authentic way possible. And perhaps that is the final paradox of leadership. It is not about creating followers. It is about creating more leaders. When you awaken belief in others, you multiply influence far beyond yourself. So, wherever you are listening from, let this truth settle in your heart. You can be a leader right now, without waiting for a title, without seeking permission. Leadership is not a position you gain. It is a choice you make, again and again. And in the chapters of life still unwritten, may your influence be remembered not for the power you held, but for the belief you inspired. For when you help others see the greatness within themselves, you have become the kind of leader the world most desperately needs.